Okay, so hey, let's go on. I was just talking about Beto O'Rourke tonight and the possibility that he might be running for president to challenge Donald Trump in 2020. Who knows what's going to be happening with that one, but I mean, a lot of people were mentioning the possibility that Beto O'Rourke would like to be a candidate for the presidency in 2020. And we don't really know what's going to happen yet because I mentioned a couple times on this channel that presidential candidate Andrew Yang for the Dems would expect that there were going to be up to 25 Democratic challengers for the presidency. But we also have to bear in mind that we no longer live in a two-party nation. We also live in a nation that's really gaining a lot of support and attention for things such as third parties. I mean, we're talking about the Libertarians, the Greens, as well as some of the up-and-coming ones, such as the Prohibition Party is going to be hosting another candidate, most likely Bill Bays, and perhaps some other things like the Working Families Party might want to throw someone out there. And we have a lot of third parties that are functioning on the state and local level. The Natural Law Party at least has, a no one candidate in Louisiana, and the Alaskan Independence Party is one that's also won the governorship in Alaska back in 1992 with 38% of the popular vote. I mean, like, I would think it would just be extraordinary if we could somehow, some way, have a third party do that in the presidential election and, take on the popular vote and the electoral college as a third party. And the only way that that's going to happen is if we have some sort of unity among the other third parties, the Greens and the Libertarians, just unite into one, and then they pull in all the other people who are supporting things like the U.S. labor movement, and also appeal to the Justice Democrats to come on in together. I mentioned on my Beto O'Rourke upload that there was a poll out that the Justice Democrats were even thinking about becoming their own sort of political entity. Progressive Voice put out a poll and they were just like, should the Justice Democrats and the Democrats split into two factions, or two parties rather? Well, and I was just like, you probably should make that decision after 2020 because right now they need to stay unified. What are some of the top issues that are going to be coming up for the 2020 general election? Well, the biggest thing that we would want to look at on this particular case right now is healthcare. And there's just this enormous debate that's going on. What do we do about healthcare? Because so many people in America, and Michael Moore even argues that it's a majority of Americans, they want some sort of, healthcare that's going to be available to every single person, whether it's Medicare for all, universal single payer, whatever name you want to call it. I think the overwhelming sentiment that is coming into a lot of people is that we are going to have just a sort of healthcare system that is available to everyone. And I mean, it's not the craziest thing in the world because what we have to sort of admit is it really just feels like the insurance companies have done the cost benefit analysis and they're just like it's cheaper for them to just let 45,000 people die every now and then as opposed to making, this happen. And it really seems like this whole big money into politics is a very influential thing on that. That's why there are a lot of things that people have been talking about, such as the reinstatement of Glass-Steagall, which would affect the mega banks, not the insurance companies, but reinstating Glass-Steagall, which Martin O'Malley was the loud champion. Individuals like Lynn Marcus have been talking about that for a long time. And when you do something like that, it makes the mega banks less powerful. Moreover, we would have to look at some other things, like people like Cenk Uygur and Kyle Kulinski have been very loud about the 28th Amendment, get money out of politics. And that's a large thing to examine. We really need to look at that. The Humanity Party, which is something I haven't done an entire upload about on this channel yet, but the Humanity Party has been talking about just candidates don't need to fundraise. They can organize on social media. While that is an extreme statement, we got to look at it from this perspective. There is a certain degree of truth to that. I mean, like social media as well as radio, television, all of those things can be done at a very, very low cost. So once we have this whole concept of contributions and super PACs, especially the super PACs, political action committees, people can donate money and we don't know where it's coming from. One of the other ways to alleviate that was Gary Johnson, of all people, the libertarian who was running from for the libertarian who was running for president, got to get my words right, stated that we can have super PAC, we just have to be very transparent where the money's coming from, and it needs to be published. Also, we could say things at press conferences or political rallies. People could just put up the names of who's supporting a candidate financially, and perhaps that could be somewhat beneficial to what's going on in the world. I mean, so people could actually see everything firsthand about who's supporting them. The way you learn about a candidate is not with hours of YouTube, but by finding out who is supporting them financially. It's a very simple kind of axiom to follow, but it really feels like there's a lot of truth to that. And I first heard that one from Dan Yellow Balls of the Tax Wall Street Party, another one of the third parties that we mentioned. So really, America is divided into just the Republicans, the Democrats, and this massive coalition of third parties, which really just needs to form together into an actual, genuine coalition. Then they might have a chance at achieving 31, 33% of the vote, 34% of the vote, and pulling in a majority. Once again, this has been done before at the state and local level. It is very possible to win a three-way race. I mean, like, I was just even looking at, some things from Boundary County, Idaho the other day. It was for an upcoming project, and I really saw that third parties were very popular in that part of the country for a period of time. There really was a lot of support behind these things. Well, that tells us that it is possible for us to think outside the box and to unify third parties and independents into a massive coalition. And I think a lot of people are just kind of frustrated with the existing political system. Republicans are frustrated. Democrats are frustrated. People are frustrated all across the board because they keep voting for things and expecting a certain degree of change. They keep voting for things and expecting people to actually fulfill their promises. And in this age of the internet where it's so easy to discuss things and it's so easy to just hear criticisms and commentary, and it's much easier to get informed by not only the mainstream sources, but actually by people, who are just kind of independent, and also just people who are on your Facebook list and your Twitter feed, people whom you even know personally can, have the access to an enormous amount of information, and they're sort of starting to recognize that a lot of things in the political system are absolutely rubbish, and major change is needed. This is not a partisan issue. This is not a Republican or Democratic issue. This is just, a human issue that is going on right now in the United States of America. So when we have it from this particular perspective, what we can do is we can try to just look at what are the things that are really driving people forward. What is making people just, rise up? Well, we talked about Andrew Yang on this channel, as well as the Humanity Party, John Linder, Neil Boortz. They are all about universal basic income in some manner or fashion. Independents, Democrats, Republicans are talking about universal basic income. And I kind of made an upload recently on Andrew Yang talking about the concept of putting it to a vote. I mean, we can do that through an emergency vote in the House and the Senate, putting universal basic income to a vote, and I would accept the result about if we could actually use something like Andrew Yang's plan for the freedom dividend, giving all adults ages 18 to 64 $1,000 a month, for 12 months a year, ages 18 to 64. Very similar to what they have in Alaska, the permanent fund dividend, just on a larger level. I used to live in Alaska, and I believe the permanent fund dividend is around $1,500 per person or something like that. But the freedom dividend would be $1,000 a month until you're 64 years old. It's a fascinating idea, and I really think there could be a lot of benefits to that in society. I'm still not even being convinced after all these uploads about whether or not we should put that out there as some sort of a cash incentive or a voucher system where it can only be spent on certain items, such as food, clothing, and shelter materials, which is what the Humanity Party advocates for. I've wanted to cover them so many times on this channel. I wanted to talk so much about the Humanity Party because they had some very bold statements. What they are is there's this group affiliated with an individual named Christopher Nemelka. He's the only public person of their for the Humanity Party, and he comes at this from sort of he was involved with some religious, outgoing social events. Let's just say that in his younger years. But what the Humanity Party really has tried to sort of achieve is that they promoted this idea that we just need universal basic income in the form of a voucher system. And that sounds like a fascinating thing. And when I heard that, they really promoted it as a plan to reduce poverty. And I just thought, oh my gosh, I just have to know more about this because it sounds like a very, very entertaining and brilliant way to go about it. But the problem why, and the reason why I haven't done more about them on the channel is, for starters, they're very poorly well known. Not many people know who they are. Their YouTube videos get somewhere between 900 and 4,500 views. If I were getting views like that, I would think that that's extraordinary. I would think that that is an excellent thing to have. But with people from the Humanity Party, it is they put in so much more work. They aren't just promoting a black box. They're actually promoting very well-made videos, but they're getting not that many views. So that's the first reason why I haven't talked about them. I didn't think anyone would listen. And the second thing is that they started adding in some bizarre things to their platform, such as they want this actual law that says you're allowed to eat once a day at an all-you-can-eat buffet restaurant for free. And then they also say that they need to get rid of animals that can eat humans, like there would be predators toward humans like alligators and crocodiles, to get rid of them. I mean, excuse me, but I just think that that stuff is a little far out and it's a little bit too kind of unnecessary to promote, to give that stuff any sort of attention, because I mean I can't even really promote that with any sort of sense of decency. Also, when we're wanting to talk about what's going to be going on with the presidential election, once again, we can not only look at the Republicans and the Democrats. What we need to do is also look toward the individuals like the Libertarians. I'm really hoping that Darrell W. Perry is going to run for president on the Libertarian ticket. I think he'll contribute a lot to the debate. He has the anarcho-capitalist mindset, but in sort of a kind of a different, more world peace tone. Adam Kokesh is running. We've talked about both of these individuals on the channel, but we've also have a new book out by Adam Kokesh called Freedom. I'm reading it now. It has some interesting things in it, but overall I would say that it's rather going to be kind of too fantasyful as opposed to kind of realistic. It's focusing too much on some sort of things that aren't dealing with planet Earth. And I was watching a recent debate with Adam Kokesh that I mentioned in my upload here on Ludwig von Mises, where we discussed that one of his debates. And in that debate, they were just saying he doesn't have a plan to go from the world we live in now to the anarcho-capitalist utopia that he's talking about. He doesn't have a plan to go from the present to this libertarian paradise, because in the process, if you were actually to go about this, then tens of thousands of people would be kind of subject to either death or very serious starvation and malnutrition. Goodness gracious, I mean, like, there is a slight possibility with that, but I love discussing the things that are put forth by the libertarians, because I want to hear anyone who's challenging the two-party system, first of all. And the next thing is, there could be actually something that is rather entertaining, and also, you know, it could actually be some value that could affect our political climate in the future, especially when they talk about some of the concepts of how, like, the smallest minority is one, you should have the right to secede, and no one should have the right to control another person, and the government is essentially a way that controls other people. You know, it's very entertaining stuff. We haven't talked too much about the Green Party on this channel, and I really hope that the Greens do not put up Dr. Jill Stein again. She's had twice. 2 times. 2 times is enough for her. She ran for president twice on the Green ticket. Now it's time for them to find somebody else. I mean, like, I'm not really sure what people on this channel think about Bernie Sanders or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but right now they're promoting democratic socialism. I did an upload about a year ago sort of talking about Ron Paul versus Bernie Sanders, libertarianism versus democratic socialism, and, you know, like, I still have some of the same feelings going on now that socialism would be so much more difficult to convey to the masses of America as opposed to something such as a free market economy with a higher social safety net. I feel that that's going to be much easier in terms of terminology to convey to the masses of America and to convey to the people who are going to be engaging with the new and upcoming political climate, the millennials, the people who we want to vote. One of the things that we really have to recognize, and to Ocasio-Cortez's credit, she reached out to the 1825 demographic with a passion. She really reached out to them because she was just sort of like, everyone told me it's hopeless, do not talk to them, but she did anyway. I do appreciate that mentality, but to come across on a national level, endorsing socialism is going to be very, very difficult. And endorsing socialism is going to be very difficult to sort of pull in the entire country under one sort of platform. Where's the unity going to be? Furthermore, the Democrats are even talking about maybe they have to sort of break away from other parts of their own political party. I mean, like they're going to split into the Democrats and the Justice Democrats, like what we were saying at the beginning. Well, if you're going to be doing that, okay, if you're going to be doing that, well, that already means that you aren't united. And that's really what the country's in need of right now. The United States of America is going to be very much in need of unity. If we're going to be talking about the top presidential issues in 2020, it's going to be unity. When we have people marching on Charlottesville shouting, Jews will not replace us, that means that the United States of America is in need of unity, and they're going to need a president that can unify us. I mean, I'm not sure Beto O'Rourke is the person to do that, but what I would say is he is mild enough that he could be sort of somewhat appealing to the entirety of the Democratic platform. The entirety of the Democratic Party and independents might also want to get behind him. I think that there is that possibility that is associated with a guy like Beto O'Rourke. The other person that I really talked about a lot on this channel was Tim Ryan. I put out an upload about him, who is actually very serious about, running for president, as opposed to someone like O'Rourke, who is, I guess you would say, in the exploratory phase right now. And, it's like Tim Ryan is someone who has talked about a wide range of issues affecting the Democrats. Not only the political stuff, not only attacking the GOP tax bill, but also looking at, things like mindfulness and education, as well as sort of dealing with things like organic food, the organic food revolution and farm to table living. The Democrats are all about these things, but Tim Ryan is also someone who had come across as somewhat of a unifier, as opposed to someone who is, promoting divisive rhetoric. Because somebody even like Elizabeth Warren might not be the biggest unifier. Some people might not think that she is centered enough. Some people might not think she's extreme enough. But, someone like Beto O'Rourke can kind of move around across the edges. I mean, Beto O'Rourke is kind of bland in my opinion, but I think his blandness is something that could be appealing to a lot of people, where Elizabeth Warren is staunch, but people don't quite know what, to make of her staunch nature. Anyway, it's going to be a very entertaining presidential election coming up. Richard Ojeda from West Virginia, my home state of West Virginia, is running for president now. Richard Ojeda was running for West Virginia's 3rd congressional district in the 2018 midterms. He was not successful. He didn't win the seat, but he has now announced a candidacy for the presidency. He is going to become a candidate. He is going to try and take the nomination. What we can say is Andrew Yang seems to be right, that we're going to be having many candidates all competing for the same position. It's going to be enormous, but Donald Trump was predicting this very early on, and he was very, very, very much in favor of, bring on the fight. Donald Trump is someone who doesn't really back down, and that is one of the reasons why people were talking about Michael Avenatti. They really thought that Michael Avenatti could be the Democrats' Donald Trump. He could be someone who is sort of a political outsider, who is just not afraid to challenge the system. And that's what a lot of people were saying about Avenatti. They were just like, okay, I mean, he's willing to fight. He's willing to, just take on any sort of challenge. I don't necessarily know if that's true. The problem with Michael Avenatti is, well, Fox News calls him the creepy porn lawyer, when in reality, he can come across as kind of shady. I don't think he's a creepy porn lawyer, to be honest, but I would say that he comes across as somewhat of a shady individual, and that's not what the Democrats need right now. They don't need someone whose foibles can be exploited. No, they need someone who is going to look like they have good ideas. They're going to be promoting national unity. They're also going to be showing respect for progressivism. There's been this very large amount of talk on the radio and various programs about how the Democrats really just need to become progressive. We could answer that challenge question from earlier from Progressive Voice in this way. Should the Democrats split into 2 factions or parties, the Justice Democrats and the Democrats that we have now? Well, let's look at it this way. Why don't the Democrats just run more progressives? More extreme progressives. I mean, we're not talking about something such as Antifa. No, we're talking about more people who actually just want to go through with all of these things. People who are not like Joe Manchin, once again from my home state of West Virginia, unfortunately, as unfortunate as that is. I mean, Joe Manchin is someone who's kind of, he's a Republican, and but he's wearing a Democratic mask, and everybody knows it, and everybody's aware of that. And I will tell you, living in West Virginia, that's not really a giant surprise, and that's not exactly an accident. But so when we actually look at that from this perspective, what we can say is, it's just like, what we can say is that the Democrats could just do that, load the next set of primaries with progressive candidates. And I really think that that's going to be an issue that's going to be all about for the Democrats, whereas the Republicans are just going to be about staying in power. I mean, because the Republicans control the Senate, the Republicans control the presidency. They have a good grasp of these things, and they just need to hold on to it. So it's going to be a very, very close election in 2020. I'm not even surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if Donald Trump loses the popular vote again. What I can say is that we are super divided right now. Donald Trump has a very strong base. He's really pulled in a lot of the Republican support. But what's really going to happen? I mean, like, there could be another scandal that's going to be breaking out over the next couple of years. And what is going on with this Mueller probe? I mean, like, Robert Mueller's kind of faded away into the shadows or something. Apparently, there was supposed to be something about Mueller is going to be presenting things before Congress. But in reality, like, what's going on with that? Where is that going? What is really going to happen? And I wonder if, there's going to be anything at all that Mueller could ever do that would influence anything associated with the 2020 general election. What most people on the Republican side now are doing is that they're kind of promoting the idea that Robert Mueller is not going to be contributing anything at all to this discussion, that Mueller's work is really just going to be sort of about kind of just stalling. They just think that this was a shit show that was put on to just try and create a fictitious story about Russiagate. I mean, what we can say is, Russiagate. You want to talk about issues? That is something that was attempted. Yeah, Russians tried to interfere with the presidential election. They had stories running in the St. Petersburg Gazette about how you can kind of be an online troll for American social media sites. You post comments that are, that feature a particular political agenda. You write them in English. You just need to be fluent in English writing. And they work about 12 hours a day, 4 days a week. This is posted right in the St. Petersburg Gazette. But it's like, when it comes to something like that, that has nothing to do with Trump or Putin. I mean, they're posting these things in the Gazette, but you can't really tie that to any leader, especially not Donald Trump. He's not responsible for people running kind of political attack ads from across the pond and across the entire world over in Moscow and St. Petersburg. Okay, so yeah, Russians wanted to interfere. That doesn't mean that they were successful. It doesn't mean that that has any sort of collusion. I mean, like, we don't even know the 100% story on that, and it's really not looking good for anyone who's still pushing the Russiagate angle. It sounds like there are some things going on. Donald Trump Jr. meeting with Yuri Chaika. Yeah, okay, some of those things like that happen, but what I'm really just trying to say is I was kind of wondering if there's going to be anything associated with Robert Mueller that could affect the 2020 general election. And I think it would be an enormous disaster and waste of time if the Democrats weren't able to do something with that. I mean, with all the media coverage that was going on around Robert Mueller, with Time Magazine even suggesting that Robert Mueller should be Person of the Year. I mean, like, if that's all just turns out to be something that is just absolutely nothing and absolutely meaningless, well then, that's, terrible for the Democrats. But at the same time, a spade is a spade, and they have to recognize the truth. When we look at some of the other things, though, that are going to be going on with 2020, we've talked about healthcare, we've talked about universal basic income. One of the things that I've really noticed from Americans is that universal education is treated quite differently than universal healthcare. And one of the simple things that we can look at with education is, as opposed to just giving everybody free college, and free university studies, what we really need to do is recognize that a 4-year degree isn't for everyone. It's not. And that's not really a bad thing to say. I think some people would probably be not only happier, but also better off economically if they looked at things more like vocational schools and trade schools, because we have this kind of stigma in the United States of America where it's like if you don't complete your 4 year degree, it's almost just like you're missing out on something, that you aren't as good of a person. And they sort of say that you're not going to be a good person unless you go to college and all that stuff. But that's not the case. You can get an excellent job and have an excellent career going to a trade school, or you could be a college graduate who is just going to get a degree in gender studies and be, will have a very difficult time getting a job. I was about to say be unemployed, but no, not quite. But you would have a difficult time getting a job. And when you actually have things of that nature, it's going to be very difficult to sort of convey this message, but we have to try. And that's the biggest thing we need to recognize before we have even a discussion about paying for post-secondary education or having some sort of universal post-secondary education that is mostly tuition free. What we can recognize is, first of all, we need to recognize that there is not there's no need at all to force people from college to from high school, to a 4 year college. It is impractical to act like 4 year colleges for everyone when we can explore issues of trade school, maybe even other fine arts things, apprenticeships. We need to kind of expand the horizons of possibilities in the career world through things like the high school guidance counselors, our career education. All of these things really just need to become much more apparent and obvious in the high school learning process. And I think that's a very doable thing. So we can actually just talk less about public financing of higher education and just more about the cultural aspects that we're kind of dealing with here. Moreover, Donald Trump talked about pulling the United States out of the Paris Climate Accords. We don't necessarily know what's going to happen with something like that. I mean, like what's going to happen? I mean, the impact on the planet. But what we can say is green energy is enormous in America. Green energy, talking wind and solar, people are just begging to have that. People are just dying to have things like that. But some of the critics of that are really just trying to say this not from an environmental standpoint, but from an energy standpoint. They're just not going to be as any energy efficient and cost effective as things associated with fossil fuels. So what do? Well, a lot of people are talking about nuclear right now. And to be honest, it doesn't exactly sound like such a dangerous thing, because when we look at this stuff here, it's not really just nuclear. No, it's thorium. Thorium just seems like it could be the future. Liquid thorium, the Alvin Weinberg reactors. It really seems like there is a wide range of possibilities for energy resources that we haven't exactly looked at yet. But what we can say is energy is something that is in the exploratory phase. But we need to do more than just explore. We need solutions. So this is just a little kind of rambling on about the 2020 presidential election and what could happen. What do you think?